Is intuitive eating right for you? You might have heard people talk about intuitive eating a lot and wonder, like, this sounds really good. Should I do it? And that's what we're going to tackle today on the Health Rebels podcast. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is recently me and my clients did a book club and we read the book, The Fuck It Diet by Carolyn Dooner. And honestly, it's a fantastic book. I really love that book. Like, Caroline's writing style is so excited. There's so much spice and personality in it. It's a great book if you ever get a chance to read it. And during that book, she really champions intuitive eating. She really celebrates intuitive eating and trying to get people to listen to their bodies and make nutritional choices based on what their body's telling them. It's a great ideal, but it can be a little scary sometimes. And we have to decide if it's the right fit for you or not. And honestly, I think intuitive eating is a great ideal, but it's unlikely to be practical for most people. It is really unlikely to be practical for most people because the reality is it's not the way we live our lives. There's this natural tendency to have this bias towards things that seem natural. And listening to your body is one of the most natural ways to eat, right? We have this inherent belief that living like a caveman is healthier, right? Because that's how we evolved. So if we can go back to that style, maybe we'll be healthier. Biologically speaking, that might have some truth, but my landlord is going to be real pissed if I try to pay rent using some seashells and chicken bones, right? We can't go back to the way cavemen lived. It's just not going to be reasonable. It's not possible. It's not practical. We live in this really artificial world. We live in this engineered society, and the reality is we kind of need to have artificial lifestyles to meet our biological needs within this crazy world that we find ourselves, right? And that's a big basis in my coaching, is trying to combine your biological needs with your sociological challenges, right? What does your body need, and how do we match that need in this wild world that we live in? So we have this natural bias to go towards things that are natural, right? And intuitive eating sounds like it, but it's probably not going to be practical. The reality is you might not have intuitions to be at work 9 to 5, or realistically in the modern age from wake up to go to sleep, because we're all connected with emails on our phones and it's annoying, and that is what it is though, right? We live in a really artificial, unnatural world, and to live in that realm, we kind of need this artificial, unnatural path. Another point that I always want to bring up whenever people talk about should I do intuitive eating is it doesn't need to be an either or situation. It doesn't have to be either planned and structured or intuitive and free, right? It doesn't have to be either or. The reality is we can kind of do a little balance between the two. If we think about it as a spectrum, one end being intuitive, going purely off your cravings, your urges, the signals from your body, and we have structured, kind of like the bodybuilding standards, where everything is measured, weighed out. You're eating things precisely down to the gram to try to measure everything. We don't have to be either or. We don't have to be in one of those camps. We can find ourselves somewhere in the middle. If I'm honest, I'm probably about 65% structured, 35% intuitive. I have a plan. Every week on Fridays in my client community, we do menu planning. We do meal planning. We plan out the week ahead, right? I set that post on Friday so that during the weekend, clients can come up with a menu, a plan for what healthy foods they're going to eat in the next week. That empowers them to make better grocery shopping trips, to buy the food that they need and to avoid the food that they do not need. And then And then from there, it's much easier to actually eat healthy, right? Having some structure, having some plan makes it very easy. And I participate in that. I share my weekly plans. I share my menus. I share my meal plans with my clients. Not for them to follow, not for them to copy, but just to verify this is the way that we actually want to live in a healthy lifestyle. But I sometimes flex. I sometimes change during the week. Sometimes I'll feel a little bit more tired and realize that I need more carbohydrates. So I'll have a little bit more of that serving. Sometimes I'll be a little bit hungrier and want more food, and then I'll have a bigger serving of fruits or vegetables, whatever it is there. Sometimes I'll be in the middle of eating my protein serving, and I'll just kind of feel done with that particular food. My body will kind of tell me that, hey, we have enough protein from the week. We don't necessarily need this meals. We don't need this right now. Focus on other things. Sometimes I'll have a craving or an urge for something that's not on my meal plan. Sometimes I'll have some cravings for something with a little bit more fat. Like I'll just like mouth salivate, get ready for like some avocado, that creaminess, that fattiness in there. Like sometimes I'll get those cravings and I'll listen to that and I'll go on those whims. But it comes from that base of structure, right? Most of the time I'm going to be structured, but I'm willing to be adaptable based on that intuition, right? It doesn't have to be either or. You don't have to be either intuitive or structured. You can kind of dance on both lines, right? And then the final thing that we need to talk about is intuitive eating is a challenge that most people are not going to overcome. The reality is that a lot of people, according to statistics, over 80% of Americans are overweight or obese. If we follow our intuition, if we listen to what our natural tendencies are what got us into those positions. If we're looking to make a change, then we need to also change what our natural reactions are, because our natural intuition got us to where we are right now. For a lot of people, following your intuition, because we've been indoctrinated with marketing, because we've had some bad diet experiences, because we've been fed misinformation, our intuition's just broken. It's not really reliable. I don't think a lot of people have great reliability in being able to communicate with their body initially. It's a great ideal to work towards, but it's maybe not reasonable for most people. And like I mentioned in the first point, we live in this unnatural world, right? We have, unlike any other time in the history of humanity, we have so many external stimuli, so many external signals and distractions pulling at our attention all the time. Even during recording this episode, my phone's rang twice. There's been a little alert on my computer. There's nothing but distractions in our modern world, right? And even with the phone, like I have almost all my notifications turned off, and it's still a constant source of distraction and signals and stimulus. We're constantly inundated with external signals. It's really, really hard to be able to hear those internal signals. It's really hard to be able to listen to our body when the world around us is shouting. And no time throughout human history has this ever been a bigger challenge. So pushing for intuitive eating for most people right now, when you're in the hustle and bustle, when you're in this crazy, loud, distracted world, it's probably setting you up for failure. Now, when we did the book club and we discussed this, we had to be honest. The author of the book, Caroline Dooner, she is a creative. She is a self-employed, able to work from a home office. Things in her life and her environment are a little bit quieter than, say, one of my clients that's an executive at Amazon, right? There's just a different level of external demands. And when we have that, when we can balance what our actual life demands are, we can determine whether it's a good fit for us or if it's the wrong fit for us as well. If you have more flexibility, more moments of quiet and calm, that capacity to be able to pause and listen to yourself, then you have more tools and more ability to succeed with intuitive eating. But if you're like most of us, if you're like most people in our modern world, where everything is always pecking at you, always asking for demands, always pulling you in several different directions, always giving you external stimuli, you might not be able to rely on that internal communication, right? You might need more structure in that situation, right? So I think intuitive eating is a fantastic ideal. It's something to work towards, but I don't think it's something to be married to. I don't know if pre-retirement, before I'm in my 80s and 90s, if I'm ever going to try to rely exclusively on intuitive eating myself. I have a structured plan to ensure that in this crazy temptation-filled world, I'm still able to meet my biological needs, right? I have a structure there, but I do care. I am passionate. I am interested in myself and my own well-being. I am practiced and trained and pretty well versed in being able to communicate with myself and understand the signals that my body sends to me. So I have some flexibility to be able to be intuitive. Most people, it's not going to be the right fit. I don't think it's the right fit. It's a great ideal to work towards, but I don't think you need to have this standard that's a must for you, right? As you go through, if you have a structured meal plan and you feel like you need some more of one thing, feel free to have a little bit more of that thing. If you're having a structured meal plan and as you're eating, it feels like you should have less of one portion of food, then feel free to have less, right? But I would work from a basis of structure, right? Most of the day, one of the biggest complaints I get from clients is that they miss a meal because they got busy. There's so much work to do. They didn't even notice if they were hungry or not. In a world where most people are living like that, I don't know if we can trust intuitive eating. I don't know if it's the right fit for you. But if you're in a world where it's a little bit more quiet, where you're a little bit more capable of listening to yourself and you've got some practice and you're in a good position, then we can be a little bit more intuitive. So I think that's kind of the way that we need to look at things. Instead of this singular ideal and trying to put everybody into that box, we can use these three filters to figure out if it's the right fit for you, right? We have to understand how close to a natural lifestyle are you actually capable of getting in our modern engineered world? Some of us, a little bit more than others. If you're a stay-at-home creative, self-employed, or in more control of your schedule and your external stimuli, then maybe you can do a little bit more of the natural thing. But if you're in a really artificial modern situation, you might need an artificial modern lifestyle adjustment, right? We also know that it doesn't have to be either or. We can balance it. And then finally, we have to figure out where we are right now. If we're trying to make a drastic change from who we are, from where we're at right now, understanding that the intuition that got us into our current position is probably not the intuition that's going to get us to where we want to be. But if you're a little bit more in the maintenance phase, if you're a little bit more like just happy where you are and just want to continue to feel great, then maybe the intuition that got you where you are right now can continue to keep you where you are. There's things to consider before you dive full on into intuitive eating and figuring out if it's the right fit for you. And obviously, this is one of the things where we're breaking free from common standards. Instead of saying that there is something that is biologically right for everybody, we're talking about what's individually right for you. And that's one of the things that we do here at the Health Rebels podcast. It's what we do. We break free from common standards by following the Rebel Oath. We reject extremes in fitness and nutrition. We energize ourselves with healthy habits. We break free from common standards. We excite ourselves about our potential. And finally, ultimately, we love ourselves and act accordingly. And that's my challenge for you today, is until I see you again tomorrow for another episode of the Health Rebels podcast, you know what to do. Keep the oath.